Look at that. Amazing.
Let's do it.
So 356 of A to the show. Traveling
Wow.
around the world. We're in Dubai now with Amuna. How's it going?
This is the Burj Khalifa. Do you see it in the reflection
Oh,
behind
wow. Yeah, he can actually see in the background.
me? Direct view right now.
Is that the tallest
I'm not sure every
building
day
in the world?
The tallest building in the world. Yes, it is.
Wow. I can't, I can't imagine how they built that thing. That's way too big.
Imagine having that in your view every day, man.
And the door slides behind you. Amazing.
It's like
All
our
right.
Halloween from yesterday, post events.
Hey,
So Amna, yeah, tell us about yourself, what you do, what's going on in your life.
So my name is Amna. I am a social and political activist. I was born in Dubai, grew up in the UAE. I am the founder of the Black Arabs Collective, a passion project I started to shed a light on the experiences of Black Arabs as they compare to the experiences of non-Black Arabs, and how there is an actual discrepancy there. And that's my kind of my life's work now, and it's my passion, and it's what I do.
Mm-hmm. What got you into this initiative? How did you think of starting it, and like, what's the roots basically?
So, just growing up in a majority non-Black country, and experiencing what it's like to be a Black kid in that space. And then about a year ago, just over a year ago, when George Floyd was murdered completely brutally, for the first time in my 30 years of life, I was able to witness a conversation about race happening in this part of the world, but the context was always the West. It's so easy to point fingers and say, the West don't have it figured out. It's terrible. The police brutality, and it's completely true. But at the same time, it's also important to acknowledge and understand that this also happens in our own backyards. But the deflection and kind of like the resistance and the gaslighting and like the people taking everything personally as if it's like a personal attack on them when you ask them to recognize their privileges. I felt that it was a window for me to be able to kind of shed a light and show and share and kind of force like the truth into their faces.
The truth.
And that's what I do.
Okay. And so when did you start this organization?
June of last year, around like just after the murder of George Floyd.
Okay. So what kind of plans do you have, going in for events and like for supporting the Black Arabs, and what kind of message are you trying to send out?
Well, first of all, the most important message is there is racism in the Arab world. Like you would be surprised as to how hard it is to just convince people of that. Us as Arabs, we're not homogenous. Arab is not a race. We don't all look the same. But for some reason, in the majority's minds, Arabs look like Aladdin. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Like in our heads. And the truth of the matter is Arab is a culture. Arab is not a race. It's not an ethnicity. That's number one. And number two, it is a thing of, you have to constantly convince people of your truth, and then you are faced with denial and deflection and gaslighting. And so like the number one thing that I've had to do so far is just to shed the light at this is truly happening, and these are our experiences, and we actually live in a society that is racist and that is okay with its racism. We have socialized racism in the Arab world, and it's part of our jokes, it's part of our language, it's part of our TV, it's part of how we function in a society. And it's so normalized that to even call it racism to them is crazy. I was like, wait a minute, and then they jump to the straw man argument of, well, Islam says and Allah says, and since we're Muslim, therefore, this weird kind of, because of this, then by default, I cannot be racist. And it's like, but you practice it on a daily basis in your language, in your your practices, in the way you treat people, in the way you view the world. And it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I would say there's complete denial of the fact that it exists and lack of awareness where people are able to understand what is going on and what kind of, like, they don't have proper perception on what racism is. Probably because they don't actually understand it very well. I feel like that's one of the main reasons. They just don't understand it enough to be able to say, yeah, this is wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, like, one of the main systems, which we've discussed before about it, which reinforces this basically mentality, is the kafala system, which still exists right now. So yeah, actually, I want to take your opinion about it. Like, what do you think?
It is modern day slavery, is what it is, and it's completely accepted. And again, it's socialized. This part of the world, because of colonialism, which is crazy. Because of colonialism, this part of the world was one of the last parts of the world to stop slavery. Up until the 1960s, there were slaves being owned. The people were owned in Saudi Arabia, and because of the British, absolutely, you can look this up. This is insane. And because of the British colonization, this changed. They were sanctioned because of the slavery. And so to replace that, the kafala system came, where you are now owned, but in a different way, by a local. And this local gets to decide your entire fate, basically. They're able to withhold whatever resources you need. And they're able to do that with the support of the law. So this is beyond terrifying, the fact that we've accepted this, and we have convinced ourselves that this is normal. You see these online celebrities talking about, if I give my maid her passport, what's next? And it's like, what are you talking about? This is a human being, and you are treating them like property, and I have justified it in your head that them asking for their basic rights is them asking for entirely too much. And all of these things are reoccurrent and socialized and accepted, and that's what we're trying to change.
Yeah, it's like, imagine if every time you have to go to work, you have to give away your ID, your passport, and your whole wallet and your phone until you finish your job.
Yeah, and then imagine living in your workplace. Imagine your boss deciding what time you sleep, what time you wake up, what you eat, what you wear, deciding whether or not they will allow you to eat, holding bargain to the resources that you need, even speaking to your family back home, being able to travel to see your family, being able to go to your own embassy to figure out a way to go back home. All of these things are completely controlled by your kafil, and it's, again, by law, accepted and legal and completely lawful, and there's nothing about it that is breaking the law. It is incredibly inhumane, but it's completely legal.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely, it's a terrible system, and I've seen, for example, some nations have been making some strides to stop their own citizens to be a part of the kafala system. I've heard, for example, the Philippines have decreased the amount of their citizens that would go to, for example, Lebanon, to be part of the kafala system. And since apparently we're not going to learn by ourselves, apparently we're not going to learn by ourselves about how to stop this kafala system. I think the states of the citizens that are coming over should basically support their people and tell them, yeah, this is not a good idea, because apparently the Arabs are not smart enough to realize that what we're doing is completely wrong.
But the most heartbreaking part of it is some countries are so low kind of income that they will have to risk it, especially African countries. They will have to risk it to feed their families, and these women will have to take the risk of maybe never ever going back home. And that's what happened in Lebanon multiple times. The maids that were killed because they took a gamble on a job. This is supposed to be a job, and it turned out to be a complete system of slavery where they had nothing. Every one of their rights was taken away from them. And it's easy. It's ambitious to want the countries to know better and to protect its people. But if the people are starving and they need the jobs, how can you protect them?
Yeah, I remember seeing also when there came a time when the inflation rate was first starting off, a lot of people were basically just putting their, they were just, once the contracts were done, they're just tossing the people on their embassies on the street. Like there's actual videos of just people in the cars tossing out, and that was like, it was disgusting.
Inhumane, incredibly inhumane, and it reduces people to property. It reduces people to things that exist in your home to cater to you. It breaks my heart.
Yeah. So, about the initiative that you're working on, is it inclusive of the current topic that we were just talking about?
Yes. So, despite some of the African immigrant population in the Arab world not being Arab, I include all Africans that live in the Arab world, and also people like me, Arabs of Afro-descendant Arabs.
Mm-hmm. And who have you been mainly working with, as in like collaborators and partners?
Well, I've collaborated with many. I've done a talk for Harvard University. I've done a talk for Duke. I've done a talk for. I was a panelist on Shabak Festival, the biggest Arab art festival that happens in the UK. I've worked with like NGOs like Dardishi. I've worked with Facebook. I did an internal panel for them, like an internal staff. I was a panelist on an event they did for their internal Middle Eastern North Africa staff. So it's been a lot of educating people, and I've really been enjoying it. And you know, we're keeping on keeping on, I guess.
Yeah. And how is that work with the Facebook group? Because right now Facebook is under a lot of heat for like so many different things.
Oh my God, the whole metaverse. I'm scared. Are you scared? I'm terrified. It sounds like we're all going to be living in a simulation, and we're all going to be living vicariously through our avatars, and it's terrifying to me.
I'm currently taking a module in my master's degree on AI and that in that field. So a lot of the topics that we talk about have to do with what Facebook is kind of doing. We've already brought up like 3 discussions about Mark Zuckerberg and his So it's constantly playing on the paranoia, and it's just something to look out for in the future. So yeah, what do you think about that? Like,
I'm terrified. And call me old-fashioned, but I'm a part of me maybe doesn't yet see the full potential of kind of really like emerging into the virtual completely. But I'm keeping an open mind. But I'm scared. You know, the movie where people have chips in their brains and they live vicariously through other people who are poor, and like there was this kind of social class also discussion where the poorer people are controlled by the people of higher class, and they play them as avatars in a game. I feel like that's what it's going to be like, but that's just Black Mirror working.
I mean, not too far from reality. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I used to, like this. Oh, every time we talk about like racism, I always imagine when I was a kid, I was like taught not to hate other people, and to me, someone coming from a different race, I don't know. I see it as like someone with a different eye color or something. They're all people. Everyone's the same. I never really understand why some people, judge others or mistreat others based on just simply the color of your skin. I don't know if you have something to say about that.
It's just this socialized idea that started a long, long time ago that people of darker complexion are subservient, and they are and they are inferior, and they are unattractive, and they are unintelligent, and they are lazy, and they are completely, totally, I agree. But it's the socialized idea that goes beyond, today. It goes back hundreds of years, and it extends all over the world. If you look at any part of the world, the darker your skin color, the more disadvantaged you are. If you go to Russia, if you go to Brazil, if you go to China, if you go to India, exactly. Yeah. Any part of the world, the darker your skin complexion, the more disadvantaged you are. And that is a systemic racism that goes literally all over the world, and it's completely accepted, but it's also it's accepted but also denied. So we're going to function within a racist system, but we also will deny it when we are called out on it. And that's what we're trying to undo.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a really hard problem to work on, because it's a problem that's it's been going on for so long, right? And it's a huge part of our culture, and us trying to want to, make changes is us trying to change the culture. And
exactly.
People don't like that. Yeah.
They hate change. The two things they hate is recognizing their privileges and then changing. These are the two most difficult things for most people, and especially Arabs, because we are so proud of our culture. We're we are Arabs, we're proud people, we're this, we're that. And it's
right.
Good and well, but also, racist.
Another thing about, the Arab society I've noticed is that some people associate progress with being Western. And so they think, if you just want to become like the West now, anything goes, whatever, like the West. But progress is progress. It's, separate from where in the world you are. You just have to treat people more fairly, I guess, right?
Completely. And absolutely. I got that too. I remember I'm a bit provocative with the work I do as well. Sometimes we hold these clubhouse rooms, and I remember one of them was in Arabic, and the title was Saudi Arabia is racist. And I wrote it in that, the title was in Arabic, and the conversations were either from Black Arab immigrants in Saudi Arabia or Black Saudis themselves. They were just sharing their personal stories. And one of the rules of my club is we're not going to talk about governments, and we're not going to talk about governments, and we're not going to involve religion, because these are two hot topics. And I think and the focus in my work, at least in my message, is on individual action. Whether you are a Black individual or a non-Black individual and you want to be an ally, my focus is on individual action, and how individual action and then creating collectives will create more change than asking a government to create a policy or create a new law. That's not going to help anybody if the people are still unwilling to change, right? However, the angry, butthurt people, they screen record the clubhouse or a part of it. And obviously, since I was the admin and the moderator, I was the first person. And my name is Amna, but everybody calls me Amuna. My Instagram is Amuna. My clubhouse is Amuna. So it was so easy to find me. Anyways, they screen record it, put it on Twitter, and they say, those are spies paid off by America. They are coming for our Saudi government. They are calling our government racist, and all to just deflect and not acknowledge that this and the stories were extremely heartbreaking about people who a girl was talking about. She went into a shop a bit too late, like maybe 15 minutes before closing, and she had an Apple Watch she wanted to get fixed. And the guy picks up the phone, calls his manager, and he goes Abda is here and she wants her phone fixed. And Abda is Arabic for slave. And she's standing completely mortified. And she told us the story, and she was like, I did not know how to act. She said, I froze there. And this is literally recorded, and it was part of the the recording that was posted on Twitter, but they don't care. They would rather lie and make it about these people are coming for our government, and Hukumatna Rashida, and our we're so patriotic, we love our government, how dare they come for us, instead of just listening to this girl's extremely painful and traumatizing experience. And that's what I've seen. These people would rather gaslight you than reflect internally and tackle their own internal biases.
Yeah, it's terrible, because I've seen similar examples in Lebanon happening, where they just blame it on the West instead of taking responsibility for what's actually going on.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
just
I'm always told that I'm paid by the West. She's paid off. What money? Give me the money. I'll take it.
I think also another thing you guys were talking about was that people fear change, and I agree with that. And I feel like it comes from a more fundamental root of humanity, which is basically like a survival instinct, because most people don't like taking risks in their life, and change is a type of risk. You know, when you're trying to change the way you think and the way you live, it's a big change for a person, and they're just rather stay complacent with what they have and the way they are. So when someone that's trying to tell them that they're wrong and change the way they're actually thinking, they're gonna be like, this is no, I don't want this. Don't ruin the way I'm living my life. I'm okay with how everything is. Don't push me to another point.
Exactly. And the resistance, like you said, biologically, this thing of, this kind of mentality has served me up until this point. Giving away my own rights to other people sounds a bit like a risk that I am not willing to take, or like going against the grain, or going against the kind of the general consensus in society. Is not good for me, and therefore I'm just going to sit here where I'm comfortably, holding on to my privilege and holding on to my position in society. But that's only serving yourself, and that's not going to take us forward as a community.
Not only that, it reinforces that mentality when you have major states that support this mindset. Like when you have the government basically supporting these laws and giving you the freedom to kind of be that kind of person, that racist person, and the state protects you that way, then you don't really have to change. And on top of that, it adds pressure on the people who are maybe considering supporting the marginalized societies, because they don't want to take a risk in their life, and then face on the state or the society as a whole, because people, in a sense, they still want to feel safe. They don't want to get out of their like safety bubble and say, it's like, no, you guys are all wrong, I'm gonna go against you. So for them, it's a bit of a challenge, I would say.
It's true. What do you think about that, Amna?
Totally, absolutely. Yeah. I completely agree. It's I understand it's scary. I get that, but it has to happen. A change has to happen for us to progress as a society, for us to create equity and equality for all.
Yeah, I think like from the individual level, and like going to people and helping them become aware of the glaring examples of racism in the Arab world, versus like, I feel like, Said, you're talking about how government has the laws that enable these things to happen, which is true. Government does have the laws to enable these things to happen, but I think it's much more effective to work on it from people, because you don't need a government to tell you whether or not to be racist. You just
I would say quite the opposite, Ali, because
funniest story. This is a real thing. It's documented. I want you to be able to Google it. You'll be able to find this. So a couple of years, I think it was 2019, Dubai, like the government of UAE, and I think it was the Executive Council of Dubai specifically, they had a new law, and they announced it through Twitter, saying that now racism will be punishable by law. If someone is blatantly racist to you and you have like proof and evidence, this person will get into trouble with the law. And the most trending hashtag for the next 2 days was racist in loving my country. And they were entirely, like, everybody agreed, the entire like Emirati local population had this agreement that like the racism is okay if it's in the name of patriarchy. This is our country. If you don't like it, leave. And this was the general consensus in between. And that's why I say, even if a country was to go out of their way to create a law that is supportive of equality, if the people are not ready to change, then a change will not happen. It was the most heartbreaking, mortifying stuff I have ever seen. And for someone who has grown up very closely with the Emirati community, my whole life, I never went to private schools. I went to government schools where 99% of the students were Emirati. I was I was heavily like culturally Emirati growing up. Not anymore, thank God. However, it was part of my upbringing heavily. And I know that racism is socialized and accepted. And I also know that no matter what you are told as an Emirati, if you are not willing to listen, if you have that, and again, this is the majority. Most people think this way. They think they think racist, basically. And they are very elitist. And we live in a country that is quite elitist, that kind of prioritizes the Emirati community above all else.
The classist.
Completely.
Yeah.
And so if a government is there to enforce something, if the people are not willing to listen, they will not. And that's why I always focus on individual action and on individual kind of your personal journey in being anti-racist and in cultivating a community around that. That is a lot more effective than what Dubai tried to do and completely backfired.
Right. Yep.
I would say maybe Dubai just did it.
Totally. Virtue signaling.
Yeah, exactly. Because like, okay, they can put this law, but at the same time, I don't know if they're properly enforcing it.
Nobody has been in trouble. It's been 2 years. No one's even been talked to.
Oh,
exactly.
Wow.
So it has to come, like when I say it has to come from the state where they actually work on it, they have to also believe in enforcing it, or any law that they make that would help this. Because the reason why
initiative, like there's not a single community initiative towards creating, this social equality, this racial equality. There's nothing like that. There is like you said, there's this class system, there's this elitist Emirati kind of prioritizing system in place, and it's just how this place functions, and it's how most places function. Dubai is just very blatant about it.
But I think America has had a kind of similar history, where people were resistant to this kind of change, and I think America has been mostly successful at getting past that phase and now into a more inclusive society. I'm not I wonder what you think, but I personally am not. I'm optimistic. I think we do have an initiative. It's the Black Arabs Collective, and they're on the A Squared podcast, and also just discussing these things open people's eyes, and hopefully it does lead to some change. So, are you let's say optimistic, or are you more realistic about the situation? How do you see this change happening
in America, in the Arab world? I have to be optimistic. I have to believe that we will be the generation to change the world. Otherwise, I would not do what I'm doing. I have to believe in our ability to change, and in our ability to look beyond ourselves and recognize our privileges and use our voice for the voiceless. I have to believe that this will happen. Otherwise, my work would be completely pointless.
Yeah, I agree. So can we talk?
I just wanted to say about something that could probably help with trying to improve going forward. So on the point of obviously the state, they have to change the education system for sure. They have to change the approach to the future generations, because the older generations it's a bit harder. So it's easier to start with the younger generations to work on the equal mindset and removing this classism for future purposes, because obviously the parents are not going to do that with their kids. They're not going to raise their kids in a way where they're like, you should be very accommodating and helpful and very woke and aware about the people around you. It's not going to happen.
Yes,
and another thing is, I would say traveling, because for example, for me, actually just traveling to other countries and living in multiple countries now it provides you with this perspective that's different than just living in one country your whole life. Because if you're living in one country your whole life, basically you're just going to have this you're going to be within the same society, and you're going to be sharing their opinions throughout the whole time you're being raised. While if you're living in multiple countries, even especially in your reproductive years, developmental years, my bad, wrong term. In your developmental years, you gain this, it's a type of education by itself.
Absolutely. And when you talked about the older generation not teaching their children, I completely agree with that. And that's why I focus on allyship, right? When I talk to people who want to become allies to the Black community, I tell them, your parents don't have access to me. They don't have access to my content, but they have access to you. So start with yourself. Unlearn the toxic stuff that we were taught. Remove the racism out of our language, because it is so socialized. In Arabic, we say a lot of problematic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So start with yourself, your internal biases, your language, change that, and then your immediate environment, the people in your family that will never ever see me or my content or the stuff that I am saying. Talk to them. That's where it starts, and with individual effort, you speaking to your parents, speaking to your aunties, your uncles, and from there it kind of trickles down and it grows, and it doesn't have to happen overnight, but at least plant a seed. And that's what I focus on when I talk about the change that I want to have happen. I want the change to be starting on an individual level and then growing. And about traveling, absolutely 100%. I could only speak for the Emirati community, and the Emirati community is extremely isolated, extremely.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a friend he just moved back to Prague. He's from Prague. He just moved back, and he said, I've lived in the UAE for 4 years. I don't think I have spoken to a single Emirati person. And it's that isolated. The Emirati community, they only ever hang out with themselves and each other, and they're so completely isolated. They're in their own bubble. And so when they travel internationally, it's very much the same thing. Yeah, so it's very, very difficult. And
yes.
Because they're from a super, super wealthy class, it's usually, from a 5-star hotel to a 5-star resort, right, to a first-class flight to you know what I mean? So it's difficult.
They can afford this isolation, no matter where they go.
Completely. Yeah. The younger generation, because of social media, is now becoming woke, like we said, and becoming a lot more kind of connected to the outside world, and makes me very, very happy.
Mm-hmm.
But up until my age, everything was just even younger than me, everything was a complete isolated bubble.
Yeah, I mean, thank God for the internet. I think the internet is really helping, people meet other people. Someone can play, an Emirati kid can play video games with someone from a different part of the world and then connect with them and realize that, we're all just the same. Yeah. That's one of the cool things about the internet. I want to ask you about your travel experience. All right, so now that you have been living in Ethiopia, what do you think, has that changed your perspective on this whole initiative you're doing?
I mean, the thing is, I am culturally and socially Arab, and Ethiopia isn't. But what I have in common with Ethiopia is my Blackness. And that part of me is thriving, baby, let me tell you. Being able to be in a country where everybody kind of looks like me, where I pass as a local, where I don't feel like an outsider. Everything inside of me is so Arab, but I'm on the outside, I am so othered because of how I look on the outside. But in Ethiopia, they don't judge me for what's on the inside. They judge me for what's on the outside, and what's on the outside passes, baby, and I'm happy there. So life here is very, like I said, isolated, but it's also a complete concrete jungle, concrete. And being in a place where there's just a lot of nature, it's either desert or skyscrapers. Literally, there's no in between. Truly shocked. It's either sand or concrete, giant skyscrapers. And being in a place that was a lot more human, the humanity in Africa, the human connection, the fact that it's not as fast-paced and capitalistic and money-hungry as things are out here, and just waking up in the morning and not feeling like an outsider has helped me, my mental health, my soul tremendously, and I'm happy. This is my first time back here in like 3.5 months, and I've missed my friends. It's so good to be back. Is it the police car, the sirens? Can you hear it?
Not at all.
Barely, yeah.
No, you're doing great. You look great. You sound great. Message is great. Let's keep going. Yeah.
Okay. I forgot what I was saying.
I wanna. You were talking about how you living in Ethiopia. You feel like more. Of course, like just getting out of the city and even just being in nature. That alone.
It's huge thing. Beautiful nature there. And yeah, it's not as fast-paced and like capitalistic and money focused and like rat racy as Dubai is. And I realized that I just don't belong in spaces like this. I'd rather be like a little hippie auntie. Mm-hmm. And that's I accepted that about myself. It's okay. I don't need to be somebody's CEO. I'm okay being a little activist and taking care of myself and trying to make the world a better place. And it's about what's important to you, right? It's about your personal priorities. Sometimes, power comes and goes, sometimes water comes and goes. But, if that's what's important to you, then you're not going to love it out there. But if what's important to you is like your soul feeling at ease and you feeling at home in a place that is not your home, because I'm a third culture kid. My father is Somali, my mom is Yemeni. And I was born and I grew up in the UAE. So I've never felt at home anywhere, not in Somalia because I'm too Arab, not in Yemen because I'm too Black, and not in the UAE because I'm an immigrant child. So the closest thing to home for me was Ethiopia. And I was like, bet.
Wow.
That's a very interesting way of connecting it, because you've had 3 different countries that you've tried to accept as your home, and then you just found this new place out of nowhere, just on a spontaneous whim, and it just worked out for you. That's a very that's a very interesting way to the connection that you just had. Is there something specific, by the way, that when you first noticed when you were in Ethiopia, that it was okay, I'm feeling this is where I belong?
Just the humanity, honestly. People are genuinely there to help each other. I'll tell you what I noticed, and I love telling the story. Instead of Uber, they have an app called Ride. And I've noticed that regardless of how many times and who and where, every ride driver, when a person who is begging or asking for money, or a person who is suffering homelessness, anybody who comes to the window asking for something, they will always give something. Every single time. And every other part of the world, I have noticed the locals, they will become completely jaded because it's in their face every single day, right?
Yeah.
But in Ethiopia, there's this kindness that exists. There's this sense of humanity. And I am coming from the complete other end of the spectrum. People know in Dubai, if you go into an elevator and you say hi, nobody will say hi back to you. People are just completely in there, nobody's here for you. Nobody cares about you. It is not I'm not here. This is not a thing,
Out of New York, basically.
They asked they didn't, there was a hotel, I think, and they had the access card, the key card, and you had to scan it before you pressed your floor. And they asked someone how it worked, and they pretended not to speak English. And then a couple of days later, because they stayed in the same hotel, they saw them speaking fluently to the reception staff. And it was the most mind-blowing thing to them, because people just don't want anything to do with you. And the person who was asking for the help was a Black person. So it's well, there you go. Well, there you go. What do you know?
Yeah.
So, and another story that I saw in Ethiopia, there was a kind of a sandy road that was a bit potholy. And I saw these guys kind of collecting money from the passing cars. And they didn't look like they needed the money, so I didn't understand. So the taxi driver tells me that it's actually a community initiative. These guys are collecting the money so they can fix this road.
Oh, wow.
And it's a completely agreed upon system of just community. Okay, we're going to share our resources so we can create something better for all of us. And it's what? You guys are nice to each other like that? I was I'm never leaving.
You don't
You
need the
know,
state to basically fix this road. You can just do it yourself. Create your
Yeah.
own taxation system and
they didn't need, a governance system. They're doing it for themselves.
Hmm.
I'm like, the municipality, they're like, what municipality? They do nothing. And I'm like, well, there you go.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, honestly. And that way, I feel like Ethiopia is way more advanced than many of the other places around the world. Because I feel like I'm in Los Angeles, they would never know how to fix their own street or do anything on their own, But but it's true. If you gather up with people, and I'm really happy for you that you found a more humane place for you to live in.
Thank
With the age of the internet, you can literally be in Ethiopia and you could still do the same work you're doing, so yeah.
Exactly. So I'm very fortunate to be able to live anywhere in the world and do what I do. And
Right.
I'm also fortunate to have found kind of a place where I felt a sense of belonging.
Hmm. I want to ask you about, because, me and Said had some black classmates, or, like Arab classmates growing up. And we know some people who are, darker skinned than us. And from hearing from your perspective, it is not easy, or you sometimes, it's hard to talk to other people because you're afraid they might be also racist to you. Do you have any advice for these younger people who are trying to fit in, but are worried about these things?
Young people who are black or non-black.
Yes, I'm talking about young black people, because I wouldn't know what to tell them.
I would tell them just love yourself, give yourself your flowers, even if society's not ready. And I've internalized a lot of what I was told when I was little. And I had this inferiority complex where I thought it was normal that everyone was racist to me, and that, all the girls in my school bullied me for being black, because that's all I saw. There was no education outside of that told me that, this is racist, and there's education about racism, and that racism is bad. There was nothing. And so I internalized a lot of it, and I thought it was normal until I grew up and I educated myself, and I was like, hold up. And I wrote an article about it, actually, and it's published in Levant X. It's an NGO magazine. It's a nonprofit magazine, and it's about how I realized that I wasn't ugly, that I was just black. And I realized that the standard I was measured up against my entire life is a standard I couldn't even try to measure up against, because it did not include me.
Mm-hmm.
A standard that glorified whiteness and proximity to whiteness, and so that's when I was like, okay, so I'm not the problem. So my advice to young black kids is just know that you're not the problem. Love yourself, give yourself your flowers, even if society is not ready to give it to you yet. It's getting dark out here. Sorry, guys.
Amazing.
No, that's all right.
Well, on that note, we do have to, wrap up this episode. We've been going on now, and really appreciating your time. That was a great message you last shared. Said, is there anything you want to ask or say?
Yeah, of course. We have to ask the final question, as always. So, what is it? What are the plans for the future, going for the society, for the initiative that you're working on, and for you as a person?
I just want to keep, expanding the work that I'm doing. I want to create more education around it. I want to give people more resources. I just want to create like a think tank and a bank of information for anti-racism, and to create a collective of really fantastic allies who are there for each other.
And for you as a person, what kind of plans do you have?
Just keep on keeping on.
All right, that sounds great. All right, Ali.
It was really lovely having you on our show. Thank you so much, honestly. I really think what you're doing is awesome. Keep doing it. We're gonna keep, sharing stories like this, and, hopefully, people wake the F up. Sometimes you just have to just put it in their face a little bit, wake up.
What you're doing is so important. Thank you.
Thank you. No, this is
the individual. It starts with creating a collective, and you guys giving me the platform and giving your audience access to what I have to say and the work that I do. That is incredible. So thank you. Thank you for having me.
Amazing.
Thank you for coming onto the show.
Another day, another episode. Signing out. Thanks, Amna. Goodbye. Woo.